We're joined by FGC Fantasy Ground College founder Laerun, who is nice enough to take some time to show us how Fantasy Ground works. We're going to talk about the kind of basic parameters of Fantasy Grounds, what it's good at, what it costs, who can use it, things like that. We're also going to walk through what it looks like for me to join a game that he is running, and for me to create a game and invite him to it, so people have some sense of how the kind of basic parameters for Fantasy Ground works. So first, again, I want to welcome Laerun to our stream. Anything that you want to say about yourself or Fantasy Grounds or your experience with the platform?
Sure. Yes, my name is founder Laerun, also known as Aaron. And I was invited by Smiteworks to help with this topic. And I'm going to help you guys navigate through the system. I've been using Fantasy Grounds for about 3 years, been playing D&D since the early 80s. And I've been training and helping people understand the platform and get familiar with how it's used and how to present the data for their campaigns.
Awesome. So we're going to go through that myself, and you're going to train one more person, even if briefly, and then hopefully some folks will see it on the video and decide to jump into a couple games of it. So first, Fantasy Grounds is available at www.fantasygrounds.com. It's also available through Steam, but the version that we're going to show everybody is the new early access Fantasy Grounds Unity. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's not
still
available through Steam, right?
Correct. And it's still in beta. So.
Okay. But this is the one that I'm running. It's the one that's running nicely on my Mac, and it's the future, from what I understand. Is that right? That's the plan. Right. Okay.
Yep. The near future.
I think I remember hearing somewhere that the exciting thing about doing it in Unity just means it's that much easier to kind of port to just about every platform out there, because almost everything can run Unity at this point.
Yes, and the connectivity and all that other stuff will be better too.
Great. So for Fantasy Grounds, what is Fantasy Grounds, and what is the basic business model for Fantasy Grounds?
I think that based off of what I've seen and what I've learned, the business model is basically you can subscribe. So if you don't have the cash to pony up, you can definitely do a subscription or you can do a one-time fee. Mm-hmm. And later on down the road, if you like the platform and you want to invest in it more, or you want to run campaigns, you can upgrade to a standard or an ultimate version.
Okay.
Normally that's on the game masters or developers. You can also opt as a player to just get the free version and connect to a person or a host that's providing the game.
Sure. So the basic model is you can either just pay that one-time fee, which for a standard license, which is just you get to connect to games, is $39 one-time fee, or $3.99 a month. Or there's the ultimate one, which is $149 as a one-time fee, or $9.99 a month. And the difference between the two of those, from what I understand, is the ultimate allows players to participate for free. They don't need to have their own license. You, as the game master, as the ultimate player, have purchased that, so that allows them to connect with that free account. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. So if you are a huge Fantasy Ground fan, or you want to maximize the number of people who can participate in your game, then an ultimate license, may be what you want to look at. The standard license would be better if you want to play with folks who are already familiar with Fantasy Grounds and probably already have their own accounts.
That is absolutely right.
Great. So the other distinction for Fantasy Grounds is that license comes with access to a number of systems automatically, but there are other systems and modules and assets that you can purchase on top of that, right?
That is right. There's a lot of third-party content out there, depending on how it's licensed.
Okay. I think I was looking through some of the systems, and Fate and Cypher system and stuff like that. A core D20 system were built in, but Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Vampire, and stuff like that were available as separate additional add-ons.
That sounds right.
Great. So Fantasy Ground itself It does not include video or audio chat. Is that correct?
That is right.
Okay. So it's basically just a straight up virtual tabletop. This is where you will manage characters. It's where you'll manage a map. It's where you'll manage kind of text communication and other assets. But if you want to be able to kind of see your other players, you'll want to set up a Zoom call or Discord call or something in addition to that.
That is correct. Most people that I've looked at, they favor one platform or the other as far as communication, but I'm more exposed to Discord, but I know people use other platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Discord is very, very popular right now. It's definitely like for people who aren't familiar with Discord but are like from a business, company standpoint, I basically just tell them that it's Slack for gamers, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, maybe I get that. So what would you kind of consider or describe as the key features and strengths of Fantasy Ground? Like, you're obviously a big fan of it. You've been using it for years. When you're trying to sell it to somebody new who hasn't used it, what's the killer feature for you?
I'm really happy with the features as a game master. I think it was written around the game master in mind. It has the feel of a game master designing it, meaning that you can take your information, you can put it in yourself if you want. It's very easy to organize once you understand how it works. And it really does a good job on keeping track of things. And it's very simple to use once you understand the real basics of it. The other strength, I think, on the more of a platform standpoint is that you can access your material at any time you like, and you do not have to have internet connectivity. And that was one of the selling points, is that some places have you locked out if you can't get online. Well, in this case, you can actually still prep your games. You can take a couple batteries and a laptop up camping and run it around a campfire. So those are the things that really turn me on about it.
And I noticed it also has LAN connectivity. So if all of your players are all kind of in the same physical location, you can connect directly to each other without having to connect online. Is that right?
Correct. That is correct.
Okay. Just sharing a few links in chat. So are there any types of games, or is there anything that you find that Fantasy Grounds may not be particularly suitable for? Like, if somebody is considering running something at Gen Con, are there any games that you found are a little more challenging or are not as rewarded for using Fantasy Grounds?
That's really subjective to the person using the rule set and their familiarity with Fantasy Grounds and the particular rule set. The biggest thing is, how does the rule set integrate with the program? And that's the disconnect for most people when they first start. So basically, what you put into Fantasy Grounds is what you're going to get out of it. There's also a few limitations as to how far it's been developed, and that has to do with manpower and bang for your buck and that sort of thing. But for the most part, most of the rule sets look really nice. They have their core functionality where you can roll and you can do all kinds of really nice automated things. But overall, it is a tool to be used to tell a story. And I think that Fantasy Grounds does a really good job with it. As far as limitations or problems, maybe if you're trying to put in a custom rule set, that might slow you down because you have to understand a little bit about how to create scripts and whatnot to create your own dice rolls and your own character sheets.
Okay. Well, so if that's an overview of Fantasy Grounds, we've talked about how it's a virtual tabletop that has a subscription or a one-time fee model, both of those at two kinds of tiers based on whether you want to effectively subsidize your players being able to participate without having to get their own licenses, and that it has additional rules modules and adventures that you can purchase to kind of immediately plug into the platform. You ready to kind of dive into showing us exactly how it works as a player? You want to set up a game and invite me to that, perhaps?
Sure.
So why don't we, Marcus, switch to the view of my window as a player, and Laerun will kind of walk me through joining them. So this is what I get after I have kind of logged into my account. This is after I have checked for updates and stuff like that. Everything has been loaded into my edition of Fantasy Grounds. And this is a program that I had to download to my computer. So this is the Unity version. So you're going to want to go to fantasygrounds.com, make sure that you download the installer for the Unity version for your operating system, install it, then go through a couple updates to make sure that you have all the current material. And then what's the next step that I need to do to join your game? You still there, Laerun?
Yes. Okay. So right now I'm loading up a campaign that is going to be hosted on the cloud, and this is a public a server.
Okay.
And once I've loaded that, I will give you the credentials, or I will tell you where to navigate to. Perfect. So at this point, you would go to Join Game.
Great. So I'm going to click on Join Campaign.
Join Campaign. Mm-hmm. And then through that list there, you would probably, you could scroll down and you can find any number of games that are open. The ones with the little locks are actually probably password protected where you won't be able to get into them. Mm-hmm. But if you went with GM name, you could type Laerun, and I can see it right there. There's Laerun LMOP Enhanced DM 101, which is my Dungeon Master 101 series. Mm-hmm. And once it's going through, it will connect and it will pop up, and you'll be able to connect to the table.
Great. So it is attempting to connect, it looks like.
Yep, that's a good thing.
And if you had set a password on it, then I would have had to enter that password at that point. Is that correct?
That's correct. Great. Yes. And that would be provided to you by your host.
Okay. When we go through me setting up a campaign, I want to set up the Pathfinder one so we can show off how that module works, and then maybe mess around with setting up a vampire one as well, just so I can get a plug-in for that. We can show people the settings that you selected in terms of passwords and stuff like that. So right now it's acquiring the file list. Is that is it me downloading the stuff that you've loaded into that session?
That is correct. It's caching all of the data that's required for you to view on your table.
Okay. Oh, great.
And normally it would be a lot quicker, but I had just started my session, so it had to wait for me to be fully up.
Got it. That makes sense. And when you're playing online, I think a lot of people will understand that it takes a few minutes. Like, this is analogous to folks coming over to your house, sorting their books out, grabbing their sodas and snacks and stuff like that. It's going to take a few minutes to get everyone to sit down at the table and ready to play.
That's right. And usually at session 0, that's like this. Once you've done all this, it goes a lot quicker and smoother as you progress through the campaign.
Okay. So it looks like I'm in your campaign now. There's the the kind of faux leather background and stuff like that. And I think you might be able to, I don't know if the stream is actually picking up my mouse cursor, but the rather amusing thing to me that I commented when we were going through it before is just how much this gives me flashbacks to old D&D video games back in the day, where the cursor would turn into a hand when you're going to pick stuff up, or it's its own special little pointer and stuff like that.
Yes.
Maybe I'm old. Whatever. I still find it entertaining. So I'm on this campaign setup.
Okay, go ahead. On the player's point, you really wouldn't have to do a whole lot of setup, but if you were going to level up or build characters, your game master would instruct you to load some books. So go ahead and hit next.
Okay.
And let's just load the SRD at this point. This is the system reference documents for 5th edition.
Okay.
This is just a real basic data, so that's all you would need at this point.
Okay.
Because the character that I'm going to show you is already built. So go ahead and close that.
Okay.
And
next again?
Next. Yep.
Any
now this
is
just, you don't really, you can do finish. As options, as a player, you don't have a whole lot of things that you can mess with or change. So let's go ahead and finish.
You're one of those old school DMs who doesn't let me do what I want. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's right. This platform is very host centric. So now that you've claimed your character, and which you picked PC, and then you clicked on an open character. Now this is Fiona. She's a 3rd level cleric. She is a hill dwarf, and she is also one of our community members that built this for us.
Okay.
So what I usually do is I would advise you to take that window and stretch it up to the top of your screen. So bring that whole thing up, and in the bottom right corner, drag that to where it touches the options below, and then try to narrow it so it's kind of as narrow as you can get it.
Okay.
There you go. Now you have different tabs on the right-hand side. You have the main tab, which is on the right-hand side of your character sheet, excuse me.
Okay, got it.
So on there, you have your main tab, which you're looking at now. You have your skills tab, which is all your skills. You have your abilities and your features and traits. There's your inventory, notes. Log is for Adventure League or whatever the organized play. And then this is all your actions. This is where you're going to spend most of your time as a player.
Okay.
So what I would advise a player to do in the beginning is once their character's set up and they kind of have an idea of what's what, I want you to take and go ahead and open up the combat tracker, which is on the right there on the interface, and drag that over to the left so that it doesn't cover your character sheet. There you go. And you can move Fiona over a little if you want. There you go. Perfect. Okay. So now what we're going to do is, now that you're on the Game Master has that. So what we're going to do is have you roll initiative. So on your main tab of your character sheet, you have an initiative in the very center. If you double click on that, that will roll the actual initiative. And it records. Yep, it records that into the combat tracker, which keeps track of all the turns. Okay. Now, to make it simpler as a player, you can drag that initiative roll down to one of those hotkeys on the bottom of your there you go. Okay. And then instead of coming back here every time you need to roll, you can roll straight from the hotkey. So just single click on that hotkey shortcut.
Okay. Much better this time.
So that's pretty cool feature. I like that. Let's go to your skills tab now.
Okay.
And same thing, same principle. You can double click on any of those total number rolls, and it will perform a skill check. And the DC challenge rating is up to your Game Master or the module. So you rolled very well there on your history check. If you were to bookmark these, you could do the same thing that you did with the initiative. If I would just pick your top 2 or 3 skills and bookmark those, so you're not constantly having to come here and roll from there. Okay. So maybe perception and one other.
Well, I picked history, man. Fiona is a very historic character. Let's do perception and religion seems appropriate for.
Perfect. Yeah, I usually just pick my top 3. I mean, you could do all of them if you wanted to, but
sure. Well, I'm having pretty good luck so far.
Yeah, you are. Glad you're not at my table.
It's going to run out sooner rather than later, I'm sure.
Okay, so your abilities tab is basically on your character sheet. That just pretty much lists what your character gets. You do have a language choice down at the bottom where it says 2 of your choice. That would be done at the character creation level, but if you go to the chat window, there's a language filter. So if there's a little drop-down button, pick one of the other than common. Pick one of the others, and go ahead and type a short little sentence in the chat box, and then hit enter. And what you'll see there is some Goblin. Now, as the Game Master, I can see the translation, and if other players also have the language listed on their character sheet, they'll get the translation as well. So you'll get the gibberish or the Goblin tongue on the bottom, and then the translation will be on top.
Got it.
So that's kind of a cool
thing. I think Dwarvish and other interesting runes. Although I'm one of those people who insists on Dwarven. Okay.
Yeah, some of them look very similar, or they are the same So
I mean, I think actually, wasn't it in the lore that Goblin and Dwarven are similar, or something like that?
yes, exactly.
Okay, interesting. Cool.
So that's
like,
a cool
this is
feature.
great. And like, this is also where you, as the GM, can just be like, oh, well, you find a note that's written in Goblin, and you post it in here. And okay,
Correct. You can present the data any way you want. Now let's go to the inventory tab. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that, but that is where you equip your armor. If you look on the right-hand side, there's some symbols, like little bags and shirts. The bags are just carried. The shirts are equipped.
Okay.
So anything with this.
Yep. So this is equipped. That is carried.
Correct.
Great.
And then you have your coins and your encumbrance below.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to notes. That is all your role-playing notes. Most of that stuff is not mechanical except for your size, which will determine your token size on a battle map, and then your alignment would be keyed off of spells that are good or evil based. But everything else is all notes.
Okay.
Let's go to the actions tab.
Great.
Okay, so this is where all the magic happens. So right now, you have your channel divinity, which is one of your features, all coded up and ready to go. You have your weapons up above. You have your warhammer. There's two different variations. One is for single-handed when you're using a shield. The other one is two-handed when you're using it with two hands. Below that, you have your consumables, which is just basically a checklist. Domain spells, and then racial traits. So go ahead and click on the Dwarven Resilience, the little button, the little running man. It's down below under racial traits.
Right here. Okay.
Yep. So part of the automation is that now that Fantasy Grounds sees that, whenever you come across poison, you will gain the resistance, and it will automatically calculate that for you.
Okay. Great.
So if you have to save versus poison, that's that. Okay. So then you have all your spells, which you use, as you would in any role-playing game, and it breaks them down into level, and then below you have standard options, which are actions that you can take other than casting spells or fighting. And that's the basic rundown of the back sheet here. They'll all be a little different depending on what class and what archetype you're running. But that's basically
also depending on like what rules or addition and all that kind of stuff.
But it is very similar across the board. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is, I don't know if you want to get this far into it, but I can throw a goblin on the combat tracker just to kind of give you a feel for what that does.
Yeah, why don't we see what it looks like at least?
Okay, so I'm going to grab a goblin out of the NPC area, and I would like it to be just a real basic run through. I don't want to get too detailed. I just going to give you a show of how it works. So, all right. So what I want to do is I'm going to load the SRD, and I'm just going to load the bestiary, which is basically a part of the SRD. It's a 3-part. You have the part that you loaded earlier, which is the base. And then you also have the part where you have a bestiary, and then there's some magic items. And what that does is it gives you a taste of the rule set without having to go out and actually purchase the whole thing. So technically, there's some starter modules out there, like Lost Mine of Fandelver for 5th edition, in which you can run the whole thing out of there and not have to go and buy everything.
I've run that many a time, at least physically. So are you loading the SRD and everything now?
Yeah, it shouldn't take too long. It's not very big. Okay. So I'm going to take I'm opening up my NPC folder, and I'm just going to look up a goblin.
Okay.
I've put it on the combat tracker, and now it should be visible for you.
Yep, it is. I see that it is healthy. It has an initiative of 3, looks like. It is hostile to me for some reason. It doesn't seem to understand that I speak Goblin, and I'm happy to talk to it.
Okay, so let's just say throughout the roleplay session, you weren't able to come to terms with him, and he insists on being aggressive with you. So at this point, you can pick to defend yourself, to do whatever you need to do to get through this.
Mhm.
So go ahead and pick your action based off of his behavior.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that he needs a clobbering so that we can sit down and talk nicely. So I should
Okay.
double click on Warhammer two-handed.
Nope, just drag and drop that dice, the black dice, on top of his entry in the combat tracker.
Oh, well, see there, my luck went.
Oh. So what happened there is he ducked as you swung that thing wildly. You kind of just went, ugh,
Mhm.
and he ducked underneath that hammer. So you aren't able to do anything. And you don't have any bonus actions other than spiritual weapon. So you're pretty much, and you have movement, of course.
Mhm.
But other than that, you're pretty much done with your offensive.
Okay.
So when you're done with your turn,
and just to be clear, so that people can understand how this worked, Fantasy Grounds calculated that for us. You didn't have
Yep.
to compare to the Goblin's AC or anything
Correct.
like that to determine whether it was hit.
Right, and it will show you in the chat what if you hit or miss.
Mhm. But it doesn't
shows very
reveal the
clear.
AC to me.
Correct. Which is kind of cool because you want to keep this as more story than numbers.
Sure.
So this is just one example of how this would play out. And then go ahead and click that down arrow in the combat tracker. That's how you pass your turn.
Okay.
That's quite often something that people miss. So I would take that down arrow and drag and drop it to your hotkeys below. So you can actually drag that down. And when your turn is over, you click that. And that's when the DM knows it's ready. You're ready to go on. That is often forgotten even by game masters. So that takes a little getting used to. Okay, so you pass your turn to the goblin. So his name is Quijibo Rib Kicker.
Okay, sounds good.
So
Sounds like a mighty goblin warrior.
So he's none too happy with the aggression. He figured, well, this dwarven female, she's is she a worthy component? So he's armed with a scimitar and he has a little bow strapped to his back. So he winds up and he tries to counter your attack. So he'll take a swing at you with his scimitar. And look at that.
See, I told you my luck would run out at just the right moment.
It did. So he rolled a 20, which is, I'm glad that happened because we can show how this works. So Fantasy Grounds in the chat window shows me on my side that Fiona has performed a critical, or the goblin has performed a critical hit on Fiona.
Mm-hmm.
So Fantasy Grounds already knows now to treat this as a critical hit. So at this point, I will drag and drop the damage on Fiona. It knows to roll the extra die. And you took a total of 12 points of damage. So his little wicked blade went right in. Yeah, it does. His little wicked blade went right in between your armor plates. So he
and I see it showing up here under wounds, right? Yep.
Yep.
Like it's wounds. Great.
Yep. So I will now. He isn't budging right now, so I'm going to pass the turn. And now it is your turn.
Great. Well,
so you can choose what to do.
Let's do one more attempt at this and see what happens. Well, this is working out great. So I have missed again. Oh, and then I need to pass my turn.
Yep. So at that point, you're realizing that you might be in a little danger. So your next turn, you may want to think of something different. So the scimitar wickedly comes slashing at you again, and this time it's coming from a different direction. Very deftly, he comes around the opposite side and connects with you, and his little blade again connects with your bare flesh.
Yeah, I clearly came here for a historical discussion, and that is not what I got.
So you have suffered a little scratch there. It did hurt, but it wasn't as bad as that first one. Mm-hmm. First one, he nearly impaled you.
So we are listed at round 2 now. Okay. So I think that gives a pretty good sense of what this is like from a player perspective. If you had more characters available during that first screen, I would have had more portraits to select from, right? You still there, Laerun?
Yes. So you would have a top view or a battle map that you can also add to add more immersion.
Okay.
So you could get a lot more tactical if you wanted to.
Okay. I think we can show some of that when we go through me creating the game.
That's fine.
Is there anything else that you want to show people who are players to make them feel more comfortable with hopping into a Fantasy Grounds game? I mean, it looks like basically the GM will have set up the game, will have loaded the rules, will have been able to reload to load pre-generated characters and stuff like that. So a lot of it is just kind of knowing how to navigate your character and what those abilities do, which is something the GM can kind of walk you through when they're playing.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Okay.
You can rest assured that you're going to have at least one other player that's played usually,
Okay.
and that's helpful as well. So don't feel intimidated or anything. Just have fun, play around with the character sheet, and ask questions, and that's really all you need to do.
Yeah, I mean that's something that we've been trying to emphasize for everybody when they're if they're not familiar with playing games online, to don't be intimidated by it, just to take the plunge. Like honestly, we all want to play games right now. A lot of us enjoy playing games in person, but that's just not an option for this year. So you're just going to have to like learn to adapt and learn to get used to a new environment, which is going to take some time. So it's not going to be as comfortable or familiar, but you will pick it up very quickly. And the other people at the virtual table also want to play. And chances are they're going to be more than happy to share what they've learned with you so that you can kind of get up to speed and run as quickly as you can.
So I can't walk away without you healing yourself. So go ahead and drag your Cure Wounds, which is in your domain spells.
Okay.
There's a little plus. Drag that little plus sign to your character, and it should take care of some of those wounds for you.
Hey, that's a better roll.
What do you know? Okay, so what do you want to do next?
Well, why don't I exit this, unless there's anything else that you wanted to share about the player view with everybody. Have you covered most of what you want to do? Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So then I'm ready to exit this campaign. The game's been fun. Thank you very much for playing through this with me. I've got another game to go to. How do I exit this?
Okay, in the case of Unity, you can just exit out.
Okay. So I'm going to give Marcus a warning before I do that so that he can transition to a different window. Great.
Yep.
So let me close this so that I can reopen it. Okay. It is closed. And I'm reopening it. Let me reshare it to Marcus. So now we're going to walk through me creating a game that I'm going to invite you to, correct?
Yep.
Great. So I'm at the same screen where I started again. I could go to load campaign, create to join campaign if I was going to join your game again. But I want to create a new campaign and invite you to join me. So if I haven't made it before, I go to create campaign, correct?
That's right.
Okay. So in here, we're going to call it Stream Test 1.
Yep.
And what other options do I want to set maybe over here under campaign details and stuff like that?
So if you want it public, you could set that. You can put your password there if you need to. And then your nickname that you want to use for the chat or for the actual lobby or your DM name, basically.
Okay. So I'm going to enter up.
Yep.
Go ahead.
And now you can pick which type of connectivity. Private would just be you. LAN is actually, local. You have cloud, public. So any of those options you want to do. In this case, you can do LAN or private. You don't have to use, but I have to be able to connect to you. So let's go ahead and select public and cloud for server type.
So just to make sure. It's done. Yep. So just to make sure here, if I choose private, does that mean that you can't connect even if you know
That's correct.
Okay, great. So
I have
private
to.
Go ahead.
Yes, I have to be able to connect to you. So it would have to be. You'd have to give me the password and the credentials and your IP address.
Okay.
So that's how that would be.
Great.
Yep.
So the password, as you can see here, I've just set as Gen Con, just to keep it simple.
Yep.
And why don't we start with Pathfinder 2?
Oh yes.
I think we
Beautiful
have a
rule
module
set.
for that. Oh, it looks like I need to re-enter the password and my GM name. But I'm going to start that, and it's going to start up the cloud server.
Yep. So I'm going to wait a couple minutes, and then once your table is closer to being loaded up, on my end, I'm going to launch Unity, and I'm going to join the game, and I'm going to do the same process as you did. I'm going to look for your GM name. Okay.
So you're going to look for Derek, basically. So if the GM name is, if that's how you're listed in the server list, you're going to want to make that, or the GM is going to want to make that name, as kind of unique and memorable as they can, so they don't get lost with anybody else named Derek who's actually running anything. So if you can see my screen, I have that campaign setup window. So I should click next and load some of these modules, correct?
Go ahead and load the core rule set.
Okay, so I'll click on that, and it's going to take a little bit to load.
Yeah, it takes a few seconds. There's a lot of graphics and maps and stuff bound into that.
Yeah, so I think the point that I want to get across to anybody who's considering using this to run their game is that your game will be listed in that big list of servers and GMs that you saw when I was trying to join Laerun's game. So picking a name like Laerun that is pretty unique is going to help your players navigate through that process, I think. So I have loaded Pathfinder Core. I'm going to click next. And then you said I didn't need to set any options, right? I can just click finish.
Okay, so now what you're going to want to do is go ahead and click on finish.
Okay.
And let's go to the library on the bottom right and load up a module. So you want to click on the library button on the bottom right corner. Okay. And you have the bestiary loaded and you have the core rules. So let's click on modules now. Okay. And let's take a look at the, we want that. And if you were going to build characters, you would load the player's guide as well. Yep.
Anything
I think you're pretty good. Okay. I think you're good.
Okay. So I can just close that. And now this shows me here what I've loaded.
Correct. And if you want to look at this as an actual book and not modular, you can click on the Age of Ashes book.
Okay.
And then if you see where it says reference manual, this is the actual PDF or the main book. So if you click in here, this will give you your sections and you can read through it just like a module, and you have the navigation buttons on the bottom right corner or on the bottom. Okay. So that's how you turn your pages.
Okay.
Okay, so now that it's loaded, go ahead and change your view to Game Master mode.
Okay, so GM mode, which is, looks like it's already at. Okay.
Yeah, it was default for being the host.
Okay, so I close that.
Yep. Let's bring up the combat tracker.
Okay.
And let's place that.
Great.
And the next thing we're going to want to do is actually bring the combat tracker closer to the chat window and try to make it as small as you can. And you're going to have to leave a little bit of room on the top left corner because if I connect, you won't be able to see. There you go.
Great.
And let's go ahead and open up the story entry.
Okay.
And let's navigate to the group. So in the group settings, let's go to the adventure. I think it's 1.2 is where we wanted to start.
Yep,
we're assuming that we're assuming that you already read the intro and that sort of thing.
Yep.
Let's go to, let's see, approaching the town hall or anything like that.
Okay. Outside town hall, maybe?
Yes.
Okay. So this looks like the text for that encounter, basically.
That's right. And if you click on that bubble, it will show the text in the chat. So it's telling you a well-dressed female goblin, and it says, "My bumble-brashers," she laments in a distraught tone. "Why haven't I heard from my bumble-brashers? Are my people trapped in the citadel?" Those are role-playing cues for you and your players. It also gives a lot more immersion to than just showing data and presenting it.
Sure.
So that's
and you'd mentioned that this can be tagged to the languages that
correct.
Individual players might have. So some players might see different text and some might see others.
Yeah, so select Goblin at this point, because that's what she is.
Okay.
And now send the text to the chat. The one from the, yep.
Got it.
And there you go. And then when you're done, you will just select no languages or unselect any language. Go up to the top. There you go. So yes, you can absolutely do that for role playing and immersion. Okay, so we want to get to the part where the and this for spoilers out there, we're going to go to the town hall. So let's advance the pages on the bottom right. Yep. And we're going to get to the point where there's an actual encounter. And there's a map here and an encounter. So go ahead and set up the map as we had earlier.
Okay. So I'm going to just make that a little bit smaller, a little more manageable. I'm going to drag it over here.
Yes.
And then you said to right click on it and then choose view and then choose zoom to fit.
Very good, student. Thank you for remembering.
I do what I can. Have you attempted to connect to the game yet?
No, actually, I would like you to set up before I connect.
Great. Okay.
So now that you have that, let's put the story entry where you want it. So this whole scenario might take you an hour or whatever it takes to get through because there'll be a little bit of combat and there's also a hazard with the place catching on fire. So those are the two main encounter pieces to this. I don't think it was really meant to kill anybody, but I have watched other streams where the town hall itself gets so engulfed with flames that a couple people didn't even make it out. So it just depends on how it rolls at the game. So let's go ahead and close.
Spectacular misfortunes are part of what we love RPGs for.
So let's go ahead and close the story template thing in the background there. We want to keep our desk nice and tidy. And let's go ahead and pull up the encounter, which is that red pin in the center of the map. So this is tied in to the story entry and also pinned to the map. So yes, go ahead and click that. And you should get a pop-up with the NPC entry. And at that point, when it's time to spring this out, you click the down arrow on the bottom left, and it will add that to the combat tracker. At this point, it is not visible to your players or to anyone but you. So this is about where you'd want to be to run this particular piece of the module. Before anyone connects, before any of all that other stuff, you want to be at this point. You understand what's happening, and you are going to run this part. And this is how you can kind of micromanage all your sessions. You just get everything that you're going to run for the day set that way. And if you need to add on, so be it. But you want to be at a good starting point, and that's a really good piece of advice for your game masters and the host. Okay, so you can close the actual encounter part now that it's added to the. There you go. And then you would just scroll through the story entry and read how it plays out, or maybe you've already read it. And then at this point, you would say, okay, now I'm ready for all my players to connect. I know what's happening. I got everything laid out. This is what I want to do. So at that point, the player would get your credentials. And right now, I'm going through the list to find your actual game.
So I just did it as Derek. And I think you can just type in Derek and hit enter, which is what I accidentally did to you.
Yes. I see that, and I don't know if I actually see the game itself, but you called it what now? What was the name of the campaign? It wasn't it like Gen Con?
The password was Gen Con. The name of it was Streaming Test.
Okay,
Streaming Test 1, I think.
Okay. Okay. I just refreshed the list.
Okay.
So while that's happening, while the players are trying to get logged in, the next thing I would be doing at this point is kind of going over my notes. I would be looking at what may possibly be the aftermath of this encounter. I'd have all that kind of set aside in some notes or something so that it makes it smoother for me, and we can actually focus on the game and not the rules as much. So that's generally what I do to kind of prep for the campaign.
Sure. And also, like we talked briefly, like this is where, I may have made some characters, so I have pre-generated characters that players can just pop in on.
That's right.
Is there any way for a player to save a character they've made in some other campaign or some other system that they can upload into this? Okay.
Yes.
So if I'm running a game,
export.
Okay. So if I'm running a game and I tell my players that they can make their own characters, or I'm running a game that they can make their own characters, or use one of the pre-gens. I can have the pre-gens available, or when they connect, they will have an option to upload their own character. Correct?
Yes, that will be available to you if you allow it. Yes.
Great.
So I am looking for the actual stream, and I don't see it. So yeah, maybe it's still on private, or I'm not sure exactly what's happening.
So if I'm in the game, I mean, this is a good thing to kind of show people. I'm in a game.
Yes.
My player has said they can't find it. Is there anything that I can do to troubleshoot that from this view?
At this point, no. At this point, you would have to back out to the main screen where the lobby is.
Great.
And go back to load campaign and double check your credentials where the connectivity was.
Okay.
So you want to make sure that you write this down, or whatever it may take. So go ahead and exit out of this. You're not going to lose anything.
Okay. Well, so I'm going to close this window, but I'm just going to give Marcus the heads up so that he can switch back to the 2-up window. Okay, so now I'm going to exit this.
Okay.
And I will reload Fantasy Grounds. So Fantasy Grounds is back up. Let me reshare it. Okay. So now I am back to kind of the start screen that we were at before, and I can click Load Campaign, and Stream Test 1 shows up there. So I can.
I see that.
And it still has chat name as Derek. It is cloud and public, and the password is GenCon. Are there any of those details that I should change before I click start?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, that's just pretty straightforward. I'm kind of wondering why I'm not able to see it on my side, so I'll double check.
Okay.
So go ahead and connect, and then I will restart Fantasy Grounds and make sure. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, showing people the real world technical challenges they're going to run into is certainly not a bad thing. And this is where we have a GM, myself, who is not freaking out in any way. And we have you as a player who is understanding of the situation and is happily, patiently working through it.
That's right. Once you've connected to a campaign and you have the data saved, it's a lot easier to just hop in. It's just that a first initial run through that could be a little bit challenging.
Do I have to reload any modules or anything like that?
At this point, you actually already have them.
Okay.
So go ahead and close that.
Okay.
And let's open up your story entry. And just go back to the page that you had earlier, which is in chapter 1. And you can bookmark this to make it a lot easier for you to come into, so that it's not as difficult, or as because there is a way that you can shortcut all this stuff and not have to redo this.
Sure.
But it will go back into place.
Yeah, it's saving where I had marked everything.
Exactly.
So there's that.
Yep.
and the creature's already in the encounter. So hopefully you can find it in the list now.
So I'm going through it right now to make sure I can see it.
Okay. I mean, I do have a reputation for breaking any piece of technology that I touch. So that might have come into play here.
No, actually, what I'm seeing now is in the Join Game Cloud, it says your actual username. It is locked. It has, what you're using for your Fantasy Grounds forums name.
Okay.
And it says Stream Test 1. So I'm going to go ahead and start.
Great. So it
showed your username and it showed your campaign name. So I did not filter it through the Game Master or the Game Master title.
Great.
So I just went through the list. So if you keep an eye on your chat window on the bottom left, it should show that someone's connecting soon. And then you just let them log in. And on the top left corner above the combat tracker, the player's icon would show up there if we had a player available. And what I'll do is I'll select a blank character just to show that, but I'm not going to get into character building, but that is what I'll do to kind of illustrate what we're trying to show.
Okay.
And now I need a password. So
so the password was Gen Con, just all one word, all lowercase, for simplicity's sake.
And there we go.
Great. Is there any way to lock a game once people have joined to prevent other people from joining?
You can change the password. That usually helps.
Okay. So if the game is running, can I change the password? Do I have to stop the game and restart it?
You would have to restart, more than likely. Okay. There is a way to do it in Classic, where you can just change it within the game itself.
Sure.
I'm not sure in Unity. I think that if you're not able to, that it will be a feature that'll be included.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, it's still early access.
Exactly. And right now I'm getting a lobby thing because I think what happened is when I first joined, it timed out. So now it's kicking me back because it still thinks I'm in the lobby, but I'm actually not in the lobby. So let me see.
You gonna try again?
Absolutely.
Okay. Looks like Dwarven Forge just joined us.
All right, cool.
If anybody who's watching them has used Fantasy Grounds. So while you're trying to kind of reload that to get in, to talk to the folks who just rated us, A, thank you for stopping by. And B, what we're doing here is trying to go through a few of the different platforms that you might use to play a game on during Gen Con Online. So we are joined by Laerun, who is the founder of the Fantasy Grounds College, which is a community kind of group of Fantasy Ground fans who help other people get into the game, learn how to use it, share tips and tricks and stuff like that. And he is showing me how to join a game in Fantasy Grounds, how to start a game in Fantasy Grounds, so that when we release our event schedule next week, so that you can start seeing what games you might be playing during Gen Con Online, you have an idea of what the different platforms involve, and you know which ones you might be interested in, which ones you might need to learn more about before you decide to join a game or things like that. So if any of you who have just joined us, or anybody who was here the whole way through, has any particular questions that they want Laerun to try to answer, if there's a particular game you've run or a module you've run or anything like that, then just let us know. Just tag Frequent Beef in chat. That is me, and I will make sure that Laerun tries to answer the questions that you have to the best of his ability.
Yep. So right now I'm having some network issues on my end. Okay. So the one way to troubleshoot this that you might come across is it may be prudent for the game master to restart his session as
Mhm.
one troubleshooting step.
Yep.
The other is to make sure that your IP address, your connectivity, those sort of things are troubleshooted, because sometimes you'll get antivirus programs or local area outages, those sort of things.
Mhm.
Those are kind of the unforeseen things that are kind of detrimental to all virtual tabletops.
Yep.
That's one disadvantage that they all have, is that you're going to run into real world issues, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it other than reschedule and use that time wisely to prep for your next session.
Well,
And
if you think
we
about it,
usually,
part of the reason we're going online is because we had a real world local area outage
yes,
where none of us can go
yes,
to the same place together.
I know. But the other downside of that is that everybody is doing that. So it overloads the servers on all aspects of computing.
Yep.
Even just trying
Yep.
to get in my bank is a pain. So, oh, so that is a problem that you'll come across. It is something that cannot be helped. It is basically just the nature of the beast.
Okay. Well, so if you're unable to connect, why don't I'm going to repost in chat the link to Fantasy Grounds website, and then to the kind of first time setup guides that I was sent. Uh,
Yep.
is there, like, as a player or a GM, other than those guides of like how to set things up, are there particular resources or tutorials or things that you would recommend people check out? Like, if somebody says, "Hey, Fantasy Grounds is pretty interesting to me, but I've never used it before, and I want to get prepped for Gen Con because I'm going to run a game," or "I want to make sure that I can play in a game that's being run on Fantasy Grounds." Um, you know, you mentioned that Fantasy Ground College is an organization to help folks get into things. Is there a central place to send them? Is there a forum or a YouTube channel or another website or anything like that that folks can go to get additional help and advice?
Yes, we actually have our own website. It's fantasygroundscollege.net. It is a website designed to funnel everyone into our Discord. It also has a knowledge base and a calendar, once you can search for events. We do one shots, we do classes pretty much all week long, and we also do seminars and workshops that are related to fantasy and sci-fi role-playing games.
Okay.
And we also have
So,
a YouTube channel, and there's plenty of resources out there. You just have to do a little digging. A lot of it centers around YouTube, Twitch, and then there's also the official Fantasy Grounds website forums where you can get help, report errors, you can get tips from other players. So it's kind of a forum type based system. So you leave a message and hopefully you'll get a good answer. And usually your turnaround is within 24 hours. I don't think I've ever waited too long for a
sure.
question or at least some kind of response. So it's pretty decent.
And we've also invited Fantasy Grounds to hang out and have a space in our Discord server that will be running during Gen Con Online. So hopefully,
Great.
either you or somebody else from the FGC or something like that will be kind of on hand to serve, as a first point of contact or triage almost, as folks are running into issues as they're going through and setting up for Gen Con Online.
Yeah, we've experienced that already with some other cons from earlier. One thing is that's a real thing, a real world thing, is time zones. So when
Yep.
you list things, make sure that it's, makes sense for everybody and not just your time zone. A lot of people don't do the math and they get really mixed up. So that's one thing about conventions that I can just for everybody to know, is that you really need to have a system of conveying, this is the time it starts, and
Yep.
it's in this time zone. So probably use UTC.
Well, so for Gen Con Online itself, all events are scheduled and displayed in Eastern Time because that's where the
Mm-hmm.
convention is normally being held. So
Right.
you'll just want to figure out what your personal time zone is relative to that. And like personally, I like to add things to my calendar, and most calendars that I know will allow you to either just straight up type, like add this event at 6 p.m. Eastern, or when you specify the event, you can note what time zone it's scheduled in. So you don't
Yep.
actually have to do the math in your head. You just enter the element or the event on your your calendar as like 4 p.m. Eastern, and Google Calendar, Apple Calendar, whatever else you're using will sort that appropriately for wherever you are located, as long as you've set that in your calendar.
That's right.
So I guess what I would say is, if anybody in chat has a couple last questions for Laerun, because we are just a little bit over where we had said that we would have you. So again, I want to thank you for your time coming out and showing us how to do all this. So if anybody has any questions about Fantasy Grounds or about this particular application, another thing we should probably note is that we were showing the Unity version of Fantasy Grounds. This is not the version that is available through Steam. It's the version that's available directly from the Fantasy Grounds website. And this is the version that is currently in beta, is currently in early access, that they are developing for the future, basically. So if you're setting something up, you're going to want to make sure to grab that. And that actually reminds me of another question. I'm assuming that the Classic application and the Unity application do not cross over. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is absolutely correct.
And they are completely separate licenses. So if I buy a license for Unity, it does not give me a license for Classic, right?
That is right. But the content does cross over. So if you purchase a license and you have all the books, those books will still be available in the other platform.
Okay. Well, so that is going to be an important thing to remind your players about. So if you're running a game for Fantasy Grounds, you'll probably want to note in the event submission whether you're running it in Unity, which is what we were showing here, which is a little more easily accessible across multiple platforms, or if you're running it in Classic. Classic, might be if you bought the game or you bought the platform a while back, that might be what you have if you bought it through Steam. But I ran into a challenge where the current version of Classic does not run on the current version of my operating system. So that's why we had to use Unity to kind of show all these tools. So when you're submitting your event, you're going to want to note which one of those two that you are on.
That's correct.
Can you think of anything else that we haven't discussed, Laerun, that you want to make clear to people?
Just have patience and have fun, and don't worry too much about getting it wrong or getting it right that first time around. It's going to take some time to get used to. Use this as a time to observe and as a catalyst to potentially get you playing online again. There really is good strengths and weaknesses on all platforms, regardless of which one you use. But I chose Fantasy Grounds because of the people. And that is the very important piece of it. So it isn't just the functionality in the games, and it is because of the community. And that's one reason why I do this for the community, is I think it's important that we get together and play some games.
Yeah, what I'm really hoping is that from Gen Con Online, from us trying to take so many people to play games online and participate in an online convention, that a lot of people will sign up for new accounts, free accounts, trial accounts for a variety of these different platforms, and will have an opportunity to be exposed to them so they can find their favorites. They can find the ones they're interested in. They can find which ones they're not interested in. And then they can connect with the communities that have grown up around each one of those platforms. And then hopefully once Gen Con is over, they'll have a whole new community or a whole new 3 communities that they can reach out to, find new games in, and continue playing even after you pass the convention weekend, basically.
Yeah, that's really nice. I really think that this is the future of gaming and this format. I know it will get better over the years, and hopefully before I leave this earth, that it'll be more common.
Hopefully by then we'll have data jacks and I can just plug into the Matrix and be the decker that I always wanted to be.
Yeah,
but
I'm a Cyberpunk fan too.
yeah. Well, so Laerun, again, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience with the platform with us. I want to remind all of the viewers who stuck through this that we have a variety of shows that we run every week. This is not the only thing that we're doing right now, even though we're gearing up for Gen Con Online. So on Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific, we will have board games with the Brothers Murph, where the 2 of them sit down and play board games and hang out with chat. It's a very kind of friendly environment. On Wednesday, we have This Game Gets Dicey, where two people play board games online. So if you're curious about how that works out, you can watch Paula and Matthew play games with each other. One of them is in London, one's in LA. We also have Fireside at 4 p.m. on Wednesday, and that is where we go through the history of D&D this season. Peter talks to folks who were there when he was at Wizards and he bought TSR and transitioned from AD&D over to 3rd edition D&D. It's always fascinating to get insights from people who were actually there in the moment. And then on Fridays, we have Table Takes at 2 p.m., where we cover the news, the Kickstarters, the bundles, special topics each week, things like that. At 3:30 p.m. This week, we will have another Gen Con info stream with Astral. That's another virtual tabletop. And at 5 p.m., we will have another Gen Con info stream with Tabletopia. Next Wednesday, next week, we will cover Tabletop Simulator on that Wednesday after Fireside. So remember to follow our Twitch channel, turn on notifications. If you missed a stream in about 24 hours or so later, it will be up on our YouTube channel. So make sure to subscribe there. And thank you again for watching. Thank you again to Laerun. Thank you to Fantasy Grounds for helping us set this up. And I hope that we see a lot of you at Gen Con Online.